The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. First Lady Jill Biden is wrapping up her trip to the Navajo Nation today. She has been there twice before to campaign for her husband. This visit focused on the tribe's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. The Navajo Nation marked 10 consecutive days with no known COVID deaths and far fewer daily cases than early on in the pandemic. At one time, they had one of the country's highest per capita infection rates. So far, 1,263 tribal citizens have died from the virus. Now, nearly half of the population is vaccinated. That's nearly 157,000 people, and that's roughly twice the U.S. rate of vaccination. Her visit comes just days before the nation plans to reopen tribal parks to residents on Monday. It will also increase capacity for businesses, gatherings, and tribal casinos to 50%. Minnesota's state Senate briefly had a new president, and she's Native American. Senator Mary Kunesh, who is Standing Rock Lakota, took to social media to talk about her temporary time as presiding officer of the Senate. Kunesh filled in for one day for Senate President Jeremy Miller on Wednesday. She is the first Native American woman elected to Minnesota's Senate. In the post, she says she's fortunate to be a member of a growing group of people of color, Black and Indigenous lawmakers. Kunesh was voted in last November. This month, she authored a bill to create a physical office for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Task Force. A new law in Oklahoma will help state and federal law enforcement agencies investigate missing and murdered Indigenous people. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed what's known as Ida's Law. It's named for 29-year-old Ida Beard of El Reno. Beard, who is Cheyenne and Arapaho, disappeared in 2015 and has never been found. The state's Bureau of Investigation can now work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department to get federal funding and gather information. And a new Office of Liaison will develop protocols for law enforcement responding to missing and murdered Native American cases. It will also help families of the victims to understand the legal process. A city park in Richmond, California is honoring the Ohlone people. The park had been under construction, and in the process, an Ohlone shell mound was discovered in 2015. The city worked with the Confederated Villages of the Lisjan Ohlone to name the park. The Richmond Standard reports the council revealed the new name this week. It will be known as Oakway Park, which means medicine. Shell mounds are considered sacred by the Ohlone people. The park, which was completed last year, features 11 granite boulders carved with symbols and stories from the Ohlone people. The Confederated Villages of Lisjan also adopted an area in the park where they can harvest traditional medicine plants and flowers. The deadline for an American Indian College Fund scholarship is fast approaching. Any full-time student who is a citizen or descendant of a state or federally recognized tribe can apply for the Full Circle Scholarship. And if you are worried about the application being confusing, they created a video to help you apply.
Once you begin the final portion of your application, you won't be able to save any of your answers or information you input. You may want to prepare your answers for the 3 response questions in this section. Those 3 questions are: what challenges have you overcome to attend college? What are your educational and career goals, and how will the scholarship help you achieve them? And how will completing your education impact the Native American community?
The deadline to apply is May 31st. Students will be notified by August if they have been awarded a scholarship. Last year, scholarships from the American Indian College Fund supported nearly 4,000 students. Even though the official Earth Day was Thursday, you can still celebrate it this weekend. We have some ways that you can make Earth Day every day. Try planting a tree. There are lots of resources online to help you plant a tree. And it seems simple enough, but one small tree can make a huge difference. You can also try your hand at gardening, even indoor planting if you live in a cold area. Visit our website, IndianCountryToday.com, for more ideas. Just search for Vincent Schilling's article, Fun Things to Do on Earth Day Virtually. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalohungva. When we come back, it's spring, and this week brings renewed hope for many Americans.
We'll hear from warriors changing the world in different ways. Stay with us.
This is Indian Country Today.
The First Nations Development Institute argues that strong American Indian economies support healthy Native communities. It's made over 2,000 grants since 1993, including $3.4 million last year in COVID-19 emergency grants. Joining us to talk about the impact of this investment is Michael Roberts, its president and CEO. Welcome, Mike. First Nations has invested quite a bit in agriculture and food systems, as well as building communities and youth programs.
First Nations has always been interested in a wide range of asset-based development issues. I think the ag and food space is right along that same line. You know, when you look at what people spend money on, even poor folks, food is a big part of that household spending. You know, so when you look at folks in Indian country spending 40% of their household income on food, and most of it leaving reservation economies into border towns, you start to figure out there's a huge potential impact from an economic development perspective on food and household spending, especially when you look at the inputs to agriculture that Indians own: land, water, intellectual capital, traditional ecological knowledge. All these are the kinds of things that could really create a robust food system and agricultural economy in a lot of reservations.
Mike, talk about the state of philanthropy in Indian country.
Yeah, I would say two things. I think from the perspective of homegrown Indian philanthropies, they're getting to be more and more, and they're getting to be healthier and healthier. I mean, you know, the grandfather of them all is seventh generation fund, who's been doing this for quite a while, and we're not too far behind them. But you have new entrants in the field, not so new, but newer, like the Potlatch Fund, and very new, like the Indian Collective. And so from that perspective, I think you're seeing a lot more of that re-granters who are doing great work. As far as private philanthropy giving to Indian country, it's pretty abysmal still. You know, when we looked 10 years ago, less than 0.5% of private philanthropy was going to Indian country. And when we did our study 2 or 3 years ago, we saw that less than 0.4% of private philanthropic money is going to Indian country. And when you even parse out a little bit more and see how much is going to Indian controlled institutions, it's like 23/100%. And that's pretty dismal. It's pretty atrocious, really. Mark, you're part of the work that First Nations did on reclaiming Native truth. And this was a change the narrative project that we had done 4 or 5 years ago. One of the biggest findings from Native truth was the confirmation of just how invisible Indians are in this country. And that extends to people in philanthropy as well. We also looked at kind of the many myths and misconceptions that people in the public hold about Indians. Well, we did a similar study with folks in philanthropy called "We Need to Change the Way We Think," and found that program officers and people in philanthropy hold some of the very same myths. So I think that, you know, what we can do from an Indian country perspective is doing what you guys here at Indian Country Today are doing on a daily basis, and that's just raise the profile and raise the visibility of Indian people so that we're not left out of these conversations.
Thank you, Michael Roberts from First Nations Development Institute. When we come back, Great Lakes Treaty Rights. Treaty rights across the country guarantee hunting, fishing, and gathering rights for Native people to feed their families in traditional ways. Most contentious lately is the Great Lakes region, where the 11 Ojibwe tribes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. There's been lawsuits involving harassment, shootings, and even hate crimes. Paul DeMaine is the retired editor of News from Indian Country, and he joins us now. Paul, courts have backed these rights since the 1980s.
And that became the beginning of what is known as the Voight case, or the Lakota Ojibwe tribe versus the state of Wisconsin, which certified that off-reservation hunting and fishing rights still existed, and that Ojibwe citizens had a right to access those resources on public lands in northern Wisconsin at a rate of 50% of anything that could be allocated out. But there's been disputes ever since. The state of Wisconsin was nowhere ready to face those judgments. And in fact, I think that everyone was so assured that the state of Wisconsin was going to win that they were totally unprepared. And we were then faced with the media headlines that had to be rebutted. And that was the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel on that day issued a headline 2 rows deep that said, "Judge gives Indians unlimited right to hunt and fish in Wisconsin." The judge didn't give the Chippewa Indians anything they didn't already have and had reserved. And it wasn't just Indians. I'm a member of the United Nations, not an Ojibwe treaty descendant. Therefore, I didn't have a right to hunt and fish in an unlimited manner. And so we've had to, work as a community to adjust those perceptions from the very beginning. And a lot of it has led to disputes in northern Wisconsin and made exercising those rights, whether it's hunting, fishing, or gathering medicines in the woods, a dangerous situation in some cases. I mean, the Ojibwe negotiators, when they listed the resources that were utilized on and off the reservation for food, medicine, or other needed supplies for building houses, other forest products, listed, I believe, over 4,000 species, which just put some people in awe. But what it was a realization is that indigenous communities were certainly tied to that region they lived in, a 60-mile radius of resources to house, to feed, and to utilize the medicines of that area. And it was all there. Those gathering rights were still being utilized for many, many years, but at the peril of those Ojibwe citizens who were arrested, guns were confiscated, fines, people sat time in jail for exercising their rights. And in the meantime, there was this complete takeover of the management of the natural resources by the state of Wisconsin under federal laws and allowed, which pretty much erased the memory of subsistence utilization of those resources and changed it with a philosophy of generating license fees and administrative fees and so forth through trophy hunting, through thousands and thousands of fishing licenses that are given out to Wisconsin citizens and non-Wisconsin citizens to access the same resources that were reserved as property of the Ojibwe Nation and their citizens. And so there's been some natural conflict, but a lot of it comes out of erroneous information. If the DNR has determined that there's 1 million walleye available and that they're able to take 25% of those, or 250,000 of them, and you divide those walleyes in half, and the tribes have 125,000 walleyes and the sports fishery has 125 walleyes. When Ojibwe fishermen go out on the lakes, every single walleye that's brought in by spearing, a very efficient method of harvesting, not sports fishing for fun and for trophies on the wall. Every one of those walleyes is measured, sexed. They look for tumors, cancer, and other defects that might have to do with water quality. And when the allocation of walleye on that lake is exceeded, and it can be in a number of 2 or 3 nights, say they're on a particular lake, there's 100 walleye available for tribal fishermen. When those 100 walleye are taken out, that lake is closed to treaty fishing. And on May 15th or thereabouts, open water fishing opens up for sports fishery. And if that lake has a 3 walleye limit or a 2 walleye limit, let's just take a 3 walleye limit, and 50 people go out and gather 3 walleyes, it's 150 walleyes. They've already exceeded the limit on the first day of open water fishing, and open water fishing doesn't close until September. So people who've observed this know that any depletion of the walleyes and fisheries in northern Wisconsin is not the result of the Ojibwe Treaty exercise, but because there's unregulated and uncreoled fishing going on by non-Indian fishermen that exceeds the limit, and it's done on a regular basis.
Thanks, Paul Demain, former editor of News from Indian Country. Bull riders are a particular kind of warrior, crazy some might say, and Dakota Lewis is at the top of his game. You might say it's in his DNA.
It's so awesome for us. I mean, the amount of opportunity we've been given to be able to ride bulls for a living at such high level. It's just a blessing for us, really. I mean, to be able to go against the absolute best guys in the world and the best animal athletes. I mean, for bull riders, it's definitely the cream of the crop. So I'm just so blessed to be able to be a part of it and to be considered one of the best in the world.
Animal athletes, the bulls and the riders have to be at the top of their game.
Oh, you definitely have to, make time for yourself throughout your whole journey of what you got going. I mean, a lot of people think we're just crazy guys to go out there and, hang on tight for however long. Well, I mean, you definitely have to be in the best shape you can be in, because them 2,000-pound bulls, they don't really care who you are or what you do. They want to buck you off. So, and to go on it day in and day out, you have to be mentally prepared. So, I mean, we have barrels and we have practice bulls, and I'm one of the guys who ride horses a lot. I ranch. So, I mean, we definitely stay active and just do a lot of the mechanics of what it takes to stay on.
Thanks, Dakota Lewis, PBR bull rider. When we come back, environmental justice is at the heart of climate change. This week, celebrations across the country honored Earth Day. Joining us today is Jade Begay. She leads Indian Collective's work in climate justice. She was recently appointed to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Welcome, Jade. Tell us about your work for the Advisory Council.
There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the trajectory of this council. We'll be working with the administration for over the next 4 years. So the work is very much going to be developing and evolving. But, at the core, this council, for the first time ever, brings the voices and the perspectives and expertise of environmental justice communities into a formal advisory role for the White House. I think, it's up to groups like NDN Collective and the various, many grassroots organizations and also Indigenous-led nonprofits to be out in our communities, working at that community and local and grassroots level to make sure that our people, our Native communities and our Indigenous communities are aware of what's happening and what's moving in terms of environmental justice and climate action. It's been a really exciting almost 100 days with the new administration, and there's so much to track. And I think it's just up to us to really communicate and keep people posted. And that's something that we're really committed to at NDN Collective, is providing those types of materials and resources and building that literacy around climate change and around environmental justice for our communities and how people can be involved, whether that's organizing or doing direct action or working at the policy level.
Reducing greenhouse gases will require changes for all of us.
Yes. And I think that's really what it comes down to for me. I'm asked this question all the time. What can allies be doing? What can communities, cities be doing? And I really like to bring it down to the personal and the individual level in really rethinking and questioning and investigating how our daily lives are intertwined or dependent on things like the fossil fuel economy, and how much can we reduce that dependency and liberate ourselves from those kinds of attachments or those kinds of dependencies, so that we can make space for more practices in our daily lives that are, I guess, more harmonious with our goals around reducing emissions and pollution.
Jade Begay, Indian Collective. It's Oscar weekend. In recent years, there's been a move to call out Hollywood for its lack of inclusion. The recent hashtag #OscarSoWhite has been trending. But nearly 50 years ago, before social media, a young Native woman walked on stage and gave a speech protesting the treatment of Native Americans. Sasheen Littlefeather refused the Oscar on behalf of actor Marlon Brando and delivered his comments to a stunned audience.
Well, I am the first woman of color, the first Indigenous woman to ever use the Academy Award as a political platform to speak out about the stereotype of Native Indigenous people in film, in media, and in television, and also the recent happenings at that time at Wounded Knee in 1973. Before that, there was a total blackout, a media blackout. And what was happening was that the FBI, not full-blood Indians, but the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, led by J. Edgar Hoover, was planning on sending everybody who was involved at Wounded Knee to a place like Guantanamo Bay, where they would never be heard from again. And when Marlon decided to mention Wounded Knee at the Academy Awards, and my delivering the message for him, that broke open that media blackout, because that was the first time in television Academy Award history that award ceremony was broadcast via satellite throughout the whole world. Millions of people saw that presentation. Before, it had just been broadcast throughout the United States. So all the world's media came to Wounded Knee and spoiled the plans of the FBI. And they were very, very upset about that. So I got boycotted as a result. I got blacklisted or red listed as a result of that. I could not be hired because the FBI told a bunch of lies about me, that I wasn't Indian, that I rented that dress, it was a costume, that I was not to get a job in the industry again, and so on and so forth. So it was a very difficult period for me.
There's a new documentary about Sasheen Littlefeather. Find details at IndianCountryToday.com. ICT has the pleasure of bringing you natives in unexpected places, from rocket scientists to poet laureates. Today, meet the Delbert Anderson Trio. Delbert is a Navajo who lives in Farmington, New Mexico. Here is Born in an Odd Time, featuring Christopher Mike Bada, AKA DeFi.
Forgot about the mission. I was out of frame and out of vision. Had to pray to my creator, had to listen. Learning better ways from my tradition. Today, let's help our people shine bright and glisten. So I'm headed where I first said it. Work ethic shredded deserves credit. If you can make it out of this village, you can make it anywhere. Educate yourself, be dedicated, you will get you there. Couldn't do it without family and best friends. Traveling and imagining this'll never end. They say it takes a whole village just to raise a child. Be proud of where you're from, go and make them proud. I'm returning to my stomping grounds. Looking for old friends, but they're not around. Some are settled down, some are out of bounds. While our creators smiling proud, watching now.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Go outside and enjoy spring. From all of us at Indian Country Today, stay safe, my relatives. I'm Mark Trahan.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.